Ladies and gents, welcome back to CG Reaction, and this is part 2 of, I guess, Black Swallow of Death, Eugene Bullard. Yes, it's been an insane story so far. His monkey died of influenza, and yeah, he went to France finally after being a boxer. Yeah, he's basically doing a lot of things in World War. I guess, okay, obviously, like at the start of the video, I said like Black Swallow of Death. That's some badass name, so he must like kill a lot of people, some shit. But that's probably not the case because Swallow of Death is like the like the group he's part of. That's why I guess he's nicknamed that or whatever. So let's watch it.
Spending the rest of World War I scrubbing toilets. Definitely not the happy ending we were hoping for. Luckily, this is nowhere near the end of Eugene's story. So World War I comes to an end. Eugene gets released from service, not really knowing what to do next. He just goes back to pro boxing, goes in there, has his first fight. His legs are still messed up. He can't move as quick or as fast as he used to. Despite that, he goes in there, knocks out his opponent, but he breaks his right hand in the process. And to make things worse, the promoter slips out the back door before he pays Bullard, so Bullard doesn't even get paid for this pro fight where he just broke his hand. So Bullard chases this promoter down the alley, chases him down, knocks him on the ground, roughs him up a little bit, takes this wad of cash out from his jacket, takes exactly the amount that Bullard was supposed to get paid, takes that for himself, and throws the rest of the money at the guy and goes back home. So
Yeah, you would think that shit like that doesn't happen today, right? It's like a very old thing where everything was like kind of like here and there, like, you know, like people weren't connected that much. There wasn't much of evidence of anything, and like everything was kind of loose, so people could do that. Nowadays, surely that can't happen. Everybody has smartphone, everybody has recording devices, there's CCTV everywhere. We are living in internet age. Laws are much stronger. Yeah, not really. Even today, right? I mean, I've had some instances like that. Let's just say being a civil contractor, industrial civil contractor, making factories and like industrial level, right? There are always people, right, who just like, yeah, I'm not gonna pay you, like, you know, fuck you, do whatever you want type of way. And they know like you know, like whole law process of going to court and all that. It's much like annoying, right? There are not that many, but very few still are like that. And I'm guessing there's going to be same thing everywhere as well, because, you know, like in any democracy, things move very slow. I mean, there's a reason for that. And even in US, I know like how like people just file suit left and right, like cases left and right. So that is a case, I'm guessing that as well. Like people just don't pay, like, oh, what, good, sue me, what you gonna do, type of shit. People rough him up and things like that, but like some, let's just say numbheads still don't pay just out of ego. So that must be like, people eventually realize like going through court and all that hassle, it's best to, you know, like not even pursue it. So yeah, even in modern world, shit like that must happen.
at this point, Bullard comes to grips with reality. He's not the young man he once was. He's got a messed up leg. He's got a messed up back from the war. On top of that, he just broke his hand. He's not going to be able to be a prize fighter for much longer, if at all. So he decides he's going to retire from pro boxing, and he decides his next thing is going to be teaching boxing. So he takes all of the money that he has saved up from the war, from that bet he won, from winning that prize fight, and he goes and he opens his own boxing gym. Right out of the gate, it's a huge success. He already knows all the pro boxers in town. He's known as a war hero. Like, of course you want to send your kid to go learn how to box from Eugene Bullard, the Black Swallow of Death. Like, the dude couldn't not be successful at this. So the boxing gym is a huge success. He takes the money that he makes from that and reinvests it into a cafe, and that cafe turns into a bar slash nightclub. Now, because all the world-class pro boxers in the area want to go and train at Bullard's gym, it only makes sense that they're also going to want to go drink and hang out at his bar and his nightclub. And you want to know who enjoys hanging out with all the world-class boxers? All the rich, famous, wealthy people in the area.
I mean, think about it, right? I mean, that just makes sense. If you're famous, you're known for one thing. Like, who's famous, I can think of when it comes to fight, ultra famous? Let's say Brock Lesnar, right? I mean, he's still ultra famous when it comes to like MMA and things. They can just announce John Jones versus Brock Lesnar, and that would basically break a record. So if people suddenly realize, wait a minute, Brock Lesnar just started like a wrestling, proper amateur wrestling, you know, whatever studio or whatever, and also bar, this and that, that would be an instant hit. Why? Because he's Brock Lesnar. So shit like that, right? Like if you cross a certain threshold, if you become certain famous for one thing and you like pursue that as a profession, it's kind of gonna be easy. Like, yeah, it's gonna happen. right? Look at them. This might be not a great analogy, but recently that Haksua girl, right? She started podcast and it's like a famous, right? She's making shit ton of money, shit like that.
As well. So now Bullard's nightclub slash bar turns into this really high-end establishment. The problem is bars at this point in time have to close early in Paris, but there's a loophole. A bar sells individual drinks. So what Bullard does is he changes it and he no longer sells a pint of beer, a drink of whiskey. He only sells full bottles. He turns it into a bottle club, meaning that he doesn't have to shut down at all. So now not only is he attracting super high-end clientele, they're also going to be spending a ton of money and he doesn't have to shut down early like everybody else. So Bullard's Bottle Club ends up being the place to hang out and party in Paris if you're rich, powerful, and famous. All the high-ranking military officers are going there. Bullard's buddies with all of them. Okay, Louis Armstrong performs there and is personally friends with Eugene Bullard. You know, Louis Armstrong, the famous jazz musician that sings It's a Wonderful World. Josephine Baker performs at his club, who was like the it girl at this point in time, okay? F. Scott Fitzgerald is his personal friend, the guy that wrote The Great Gatsby. Hemingway ends up hanging out there so much that he based a character off of Eugene Bullard. Okay, the fact that most people have no idea who Eugene Bullard is...
Yeah, I was about to say that. I started video thinking, oh, Eugene Bullard, another one of the name that nobody knows because he was like some war hero that nobody apparently cares about. People only care about Hollywood actors, not real heroes or something. This is going to be another story. Nope. He was like A++, S++ celebrity, let's just say. Let's go with our anime rating, S++ celebrity right there. Every big people basically knew him.
Despite the fact that he's like one of the biggest main characters of all time, is absolutely insane, okay? Not only are all the other main characters from all over the world flocking to his nightclub in Paris to hang out with him, but people that are seemingly nobodies, that are just adjacent to him, somehow, seemingly through divine intervention, go on to also become humongous main characters. Because you want to know who the dishwasher is at Eugene Bullard's Bottle nightclub? It's fucking Langston Hughes, one of the most influential people of the 20th century, is doing dishes in the back at Bullard's club. So Bullard is like the pinnacle of social society.
Yeah, that is not a surprise, really. There's a phenomenon out there. If you like research it, you just basically realize that like there is always a small group of people in certain time which are insanely important, powerful, not just power and money, like, but powerful in every day, like a group of scientists. Right, group of this, group of that. You can like go back in time and think like, wait a minute, they were all friends hanging out with each other. That was the case with a lot of scientists as well, like the big scientists like Newton and everybody. Everybody just hung out with each other, and you realize like, why is it? But the case behind that is like, if you around really smart and powerful people, you basically like try to be at that level and basically excel, right? It's gonna be a surprise thing. Like there's so many people out there with potential who are not going to be much of anything. But if they just like, had certain type of mentality, right? Somebody just told them some the right thing and they just have like certain type of like, oh, I'm going to do this element. They would have been big, but they're not gonna. Being around people like that can help you do that, right? So there's way too many stories of this being around powerful people, right? What is that saying? Like if you're like the smartest person in the room, change the room, right? This kind of applies to that one.
In Paris at this point in time. Like everybody wants to hang out at his nightclub. He's a war hero. Everybody knows who he is. So during this time, he also ends up falling in love and marrying a woman by the name of Marcel. And Marcel is basically this heiress to this super rich French family. So they end up dating for a while. They end up getting married. Everything's going great. They decide they're going to start having kids. She ends up giving birth to Bullard's son, who unfortunately passes away at 6 months old from pneumonia. This scars Bullard for the rest of his life. Despite that, they do end up trying to have more kids. And in 1924, they're lucky enough to have a daughter, Jacqueline, and then again in 1927 they have another daughter, Lolita. And for the
pneumonia is deadly even today, because just saying pneumonia doesn't mean much. Pneumonia can be anything. A lot of diseases, last stage is probably pneumonia, right? That's why COVID, when you have pneumonia, if you're COVID, people are like, what the fuck? Pneumonia is that level, like last stage thing for a lot of diseases. So somebody has pneumonia and you don't treat it earlier, your lungs are just like getting permanent damage over time and you'll never recover after that. After a certain time, it's like too late.
The next couple of years after that, he's living the dream. He's getting everything that he hoped that he was fighting for. He's getting to have breakfast and lunch with his daughters every day before he goes off to work to run his nightclub. He has this, wife that they're fortunate enough that she gets to be a stay-at-home mom, and everything's going great. Unfortunately, when Marcel's parents pass away, they end up leaving her a fortune, at which point she gets a little bit tired of her husband always working at this nightclub all the time. She's super rich, and she just expects him to sell the nightclub, live off of their fortune, and they can go to the opera and just have fun for the rest of their life. But that's not who Eugene Bullard is. He wants to work for everything that he has. He wants to punch his own ticket. He wants to make his own way. He doesn't want to live off of another man's fortune, so he refuses to do it. This ends up causing a rift between Bullard and Marcel, and eventually she would end up leaving Bullard and both their daughters. Bullard ends up telling his daughters that the mom actually passed away. I'm not sure why. I'm assuming it's because the mom wanted nothing to do with them, and he thought maybe it would be easier for the daughters to come to grips with the fact that their mom got sick and died, and not their mom just doesn't want them anymore. Regardless, Bullard now finds himself in the very same situation that his father was in, a single dad looking out for his kids in the world. And if that wasn't bad enough, as time goes on and we get further from World War I and closer to World War II, more and more travelers are coming into Paris. You have Americans that are coming back to the place that they had fought in World War I to visit, particularly a lot of white men from the South that think that they can act exactly how they act in, Mississippi or Georgia at the time, and they think that they're going to be able to come over to Paris and fuck with anybody that happens to be black, particularly Eugene Bullard. And to be completely honest, it pretty much never works out for him. They all get their ass whooped by Eugene Bullard, and then the cops show up and they are like, oh, wow, now the black guy's gonna get arrested because he had the audacity to hit a white man, and that is not the case because the cops show up and they're like, oh, what's up, Eugene Bullard, Kingpin of Paris that everybody loves? Is this another racist asshole that tried to beat you up because you're black? Yeah, cool, we'll arrest his ass. And this happens like damn near hundreds of times. In addition to that, there's another demographic of racist people coming into town, the Nazis.
Imagine that shit, right? Like, oh, you're gonna get it now. It's just like, hey, how you doing, pimp? It's just like everybody just like fist bumping everything. Yeah, I won Paris, by the way. Didn't know that?
Party, and he's not putting up with their bullshit either, until he does. And the reason he starts putting up with them is because he realizes he's a perfect spy, and he starts working with the French resistance. You see, his high-profile club attracts high-profile Nazi officers, and they view him as just some dumb black guy. He definitely can't.
Who was she, the factors uncovered, who created the whole spy network France? I guess Eugene was involved in that, huh?
Speak French and German and English, so they can just say whatever they want in front of him because he's not going to be able to understand what they're talking about. So he eavesdrops on high-profile Nazi officers all the time and reports it back to the French resistance. And he's so effective at it, they actually end up assigning him like a full-time French resistance spy. Her name is Cleopatra Terrier, or as everybody calls her, Kitty. In addition to working with Kitty, he also starts to get Josephine Baker, the famous woman I mentioned earlier, to start being a spy as well. Now, the problem with that is him catering to Nazis kind of pisses everybody off, and he can't just go out and tell everybody like, hey, I'm actually being a spy and setting them up. So he just kind of has to like let everybody think that he's being friendly with the Nazis when that's not his goal at all. So the general public's kind of pissed off at Eugene, and this all comes to a head when this drunk gangster comes staggering into his club at like 2 p.m. asking where Bullard is. So Eugene comes out from the back, and this gangster immediately shoots him in the stomach. Now, Bullard, having just been shot, immediately collapses. No, I'm just kidding. The man has plot armor. He then proceeds to bum rush the guy, take the gun away from him, and then beat him unconscious and halfway to death with a bottle of booze before collapsing. So his partner Kitty and his employees end up getting him to the hospital, at which point the doctor examines him, basically says the bullet ricocheted around inside your intestines before exiting by your right hip. You're like 99% gonna die. I'd start getting your affairs in order. Sepsis is gonna set in soon. Sorry. To which Bullard basically replied like, nah, I'm good, actually. I'm a very busy guy. I've got kids I got to take care of, employees, running a couple of businesses, being a spy. I'm too busy to die right now. Basically just wills himself to live after the doctor told him he's going to die, makes a full recovery, he's perfectly fine.
Bring your punk ass over here and talk shit. You be spitting out teeth, bitch.
Now the gang...
Yeah, okay, I did follow C.D. Fletcher, I'm not gonna lie. As soon as he said that, like, so fuck that, I just like all inspiration talk. Yeah. I mean, there is some science behind that, I'm not gonna lie. Your immune system is really tied to your emotions and like your stress and everything. And willpower does work in that way, right? Doesn't work at the level that would just basically give you plot armor. So maybe he got lucky there a bit. Bullet damaged just the places that was not as fatal as the doctor thought. But yeah, it kind of makes sense if you let ricochet there, like intestines, like it's just so insane. Like you might have seen like people basically like pulling out of like autopsies and things, not seen it or at least heard about it, right? Where how it's messy and it's so long and it's like how are you going to repair damage of that, like especially back then? So kind of makes sense.
The shooter was a member of was actually hardcore anti-Nazi, and they were working with a branch of the French resistance, but it was a different branch than what Bullard was working with. So they had basically put a hit out on Bullard to have him killed because they thought he was a hardcore Nazi sympathizer, not realizing that they were on the same team the entire time and the whole thing was just one big miscommunication. So the gang members apologize profusely. They pay him off and beg him not to press charges. They give him a bunch of money, to make up for all the money that he lost by not being able to operate his club the entire time, at which point Bullard is like, okay, I guess, and that's pretty much it. So Bullard goes right back to doing what he was doing. He's running his businesses, he's being a spy, everything's going fine, and then one day from the French resistance, he gets word that, hey, the Germans they're kind of onto you. They don't know exactly who you are, but they do know that one of our top spies.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like the resistance shoots this guy survives, and they back off. Nazis are gonna pick that up. Like, wait a minute, what the fuck just happened? Right? They would basically be onto like, we see plot armor. They see like this is unrealistic. How is this guy still alive? Type of shit. So they're like, wait a minute, it must be the case.
Is a black dude that either runs or works in this nightclub, and he's like one of our top guys, which kind of narrows it down to you. So just be aware of that. But it's not really an issue because the Germans haven't invaded France until they do. And as soon as that happens, now it's a humongous fucking issue. So after the Germans invade France, he basically has to board up all his businesses. It's impossible to run a business in France at this point in time. And at this point, he has two options. He either has to A, cut and run, flee to a different country, or B, at the age of 44, Britain. He has to go get a gun and fight the Germans. And this is Eugene Bullard. So he goes, tracks down the 170th Infantry Regiment, his own unit, and he's going to go fight with them. He takes a couple of $100, gives the rest.
What about the kids though? Who's going to take care of the kids? Right? Isn't that an issue?
Of his life savings to his partner Kitty, tells Kitty to watch after his girls until he comes back, and if he dies, get his girls somewhere safe. He loads up a 50-pound backpack with wine, cigarettes, and sardines, which is basically beef jerky, and heads off to the front line to link up with the 170th at the age of 44 years old. Okay, can we just take a minute to appreciate what a fucking gangster Eugene Bullard is? Like, the Germans attack, everybody else is fleeing the country, and his immediate knee-jerk reaction is like, I need a big backpack, I need cigarettes, booze, canned meat, and money for more cigarettes. I'll find a gun along the way. I'm gonna go fight these motherfuckers again, double or nothing, at the age of 44. So that's it. Bullard sets off. He's going to go rejoin the 170th and fight the Nazis. He gets about halfway there, and then suddenly all the people are headed the other direction, including a bunch of wounded soldiers. The 170th has been completely wiped out. So Bullard's like, okay, cool. I'm going to turn around too. I'll head back to Paris, check on my kids. I'll find out where a different army unit is, and then I'll go join them. So he gets back to Paris. Germans already have control of it, and it is under complete lockdown. He can't even get in there to check on his kids. Now, there's still pockets of resistance, so he starts asking around, finds out that there's a big unit right outside of Lyon, so he heads that way, ends up linking up with some of the soldiers there, at which point he's like, okay, I'm just gonna join you guys. They're like, you're kind of old, you need to go talk to the major in charge. So they send him that way. He goes to the major, walks in, sure enough, it's a guy that he fought with at Verdun. This major immediately recognizes Bullard as the complete badass he was from World War I, immediately promotes him to sergeant and gives him control of a machine gun squad. He then sends him out to this smaller village outside of Lyon so that they can defend it. On their way there, they get ambushed by the Germans and they get hit with German 88 artillery fire, and it ends up killing 11 men, wounding 16, including Bullard. One of the shells lands about 10 feet from him. It launched him 40 feet through the air and smacked him into the side of a building, shattering one of the vertebrae in his neck, breaking multiple ribs, messing up his entire side, and obviously giving him a humongous concussion. He gets drug out by one of the medics. He comes to in a hospital, at which point they're like, dude, we're gonna get overrun by Nazis at any minute. You're a black American that's fought against them in World War I and World War II. If they catch you, they're gonna kill you on the spot. You need to get out of here. So he grabs his stuff and just starts limping his way to Biarritz, where the American embassy is, so he can get a passport and hopefully get sent over to America.
He broke a vertebrae and all that damage shot up that eye. Oh my god, and he's like limping back. That is some insane level shit right here.
America where he's going to be safe. He walks all through the night, gets about halfway there, and then in the morning there's this field, and out in this field there's this soldier sitting up against a tree with a bicycle. So he walks out. It's a French soldier, so he's like, hey, can I have breakfast with you? Can I hang out for a minute? I'm going to sleep here for a bit. Can you look out for me? The soldier's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, do you have any food or water or anything? I'm starving. I'll trade you my bike, whatever. So he ends up trading him a couple of cans of sardines for this bike, takes a nap, grabs this bike, rides it over to Biarritz, gets to the American embassy. Okay. The embassy lets him cut to the front of the line because he's in a military uniform that's still all bloody and he's clearly wounded. He explains everything that's going on and he's like, I don't have a passport though. I left when I was 12. I ran away. I smuggled myself on a ship to Scotland. I just made my way over to France. So the American embassy is like, shit, okay. And they drag him in the back and they're getting all the information like, where were you born? What's your birth date? There was somebody there that was actually from Columbus, Georgia, and he's kind of quizzing him on the area, making sure that he's not lying. And he knows absolutely everything about Columbus, Georgia, passes the test, and they're like, okay, this guy's legit. So they fill out the paperwork for him to be able to get a passport. The problem is you can't actually get the passport there. You can just get the paperwork okaying you to get the passport there. You have to go to a different town 175 miles away to get your picture taken and to have the right person sign off on your new passport.
I'm going to die.
Now, at this point, you would think, surely, you could, I don't know, maybe hook a guy up and fucking make it work. But no, absolutely not. This is the government. We have to stick to our
World War II though. It's World War II. God damn it, come on. It's like national emergency type of shit. Come on, right? You can bypass a thing like in today's time. If like wartime happens, you can bypass a lot of things, right? Like president can just basically like, what is it called, national emergency or whatever. He can just like declare that, right? Shit like that should apply here. I mean, and like my vertebrae is broken. I'm broken. I'm this guy, right? Just give him like, I fought here, I fought at Verdun. Come on, man, you can do something for me. What are you doing?
Bureaucratic nonsense. Eugene Bullard hops back on his bike and takes 2.5 days to pedal his ass 175 miles away. He finally gets there 2.5 days later. They're closed because everybody's out at lunch. Typical government nonsense. So he takes a nap. And they show back up from lunch, gets his passport, does the paperwork, gets his picture taken. The whole thing takes like 3 hours. Comes back outside. He's going to pedal his ass back 175 miles. Somebody stole his fucking bike. So now he walks 175 miles back. No, I'm just kidding. He actually steals somebody else's bike and rides that back. Okay, look, I'm here for it. There's only one thief in the army. Everybody else is just trying to get their shit back. Them's the rules. So another 2-day bike ride makes it back.
It's wartime. Haven't you played any game ever? In wartime, you just like, you acquire shit, right? Strategically acquire. What is it called? Acronym steal?
To Biarritz, gets to the embassy. They immediately put him on his way back to America. He has to go through Spain, then through Portugal. The entire trip takes like 2.5 weeks. He winds up in New York City and immediately starts doing anything he can to make money and calling up any connection that he can possibly think of, desperately trying to figure out if his daughters are okay, and if they are, how he's going to get them back to...
Oh my God, I was just about to say, what about his daughters again? He went to New York, but they are still in France. Imagine the mentality, man. I don't know how would I feel, man. I would panic, basically. Like, fuck me, I'm in America, but they're there in the middle of everything.
America. And this goes on for months, just desperately trying to figure out how to get into contact with his daughters and potentially get them back home to America. And then he actually manages to get in contact with one of his old buddies, a guy that hung out at his club all the time, the ex-ambassador to France on the behalf of America, Mr. Bullitt, and he still works in the United States State Department. So he gets a hold of him, ends up having a meeting, explains the situation. Mr. Bullitt makes one phone call, and the next day, Bullard finds out that his daughters are okay and they are now in American custody and protection, and they are going to be sent back to America to be rejoined with him. Now, the United States government is going to front the money, but Bullard is going to have to pay them back, has no idea how he's going to be able to do it. Veterans groups find out, they raise money, they pay off the entire thing. Bullard gets reunited with his daughters, Jacqueline and Lolita, and they are now living in a 750 square foot apartment in Harlem, while Bullard goes back to being a longshoreman, doing anything he can to make money and raise his daughters. A couple of months go by,
God, look at... What an insane story, man. What an up and down. Like, running away from America because of racism, being a boxer, then being a rich club owner, powerful kingpin club owner with connection and shit, already being a war veteran at that time. Everything falling to shit, going back to America, barely make it, right? No, oh, by the way, not to mention his rich wife that he married also like broke off with, like, didn't care about the kids either. Apparently, there you go. How can somebody do? Yeah. And now to like scrounge for money in America at that time, what up and down, man, right? World Wars was really insane. How many stories must have been there, like up and down shit like that?
Everything kind of stabilizes. They're getting used to their new environment. Everything's starting to look good. So naturally, Bullard, being Bullard, goes to the recruiting office of every branch of the United States military, volunteering for service because he wants to go back and keep fighting the Nazis. They politely decline. So Bullard just keeps working, keeps raising his daughters. This goes on for years and years, and then eventually his daughters grow up, they get married, they move off and do their own thing, and he is now just in this apartment by himself. After World War II came to an end, he tried to reestablish his rights of ownership to his gym and his nightclub. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of it. He was at least able to get France to recognize his military service, so France was now paying him a military pension for being a veteran. So Bullard's just kind of working, doing his thing. Then the 1950s roll around, and one of his old buddies hits him up, a guy by the name of Louis Armstrong, one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time, and is like, hey, I'm in New York. I need a backup drummer. My guy's sick. Do you want to come out? I got to do some recordings. So Eugene Bullard is actually on recordings with Louis Armstrong being his drummer in like multiple songs. He's literally like the Black Forrest Gump. Like, he's done so much random, incredible shit, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And by this point in time, Eugene's getting up there in age. He's really starting to feel all of his old war injuries. He can't keep being a longshoreman any longer. He needs to get a job that's a little bit easier on his body.
Imagine all that shit happening today. You can say anything about the modern world, but at least in today's world, like, he could have started something like a fucking TikTok or some shit, some podcasts, anything, YouTube channel, he would have been fine. At least today's world can do that for you, right? You could have done a lot of things in today's world.
So he ends up getting a job as an elevator operator at Rockefeller Center. The craziest part about this is nobody has any idea who Bullard is in America. They've never really talked about him. He's never really been in the press. He's like a legend over in France, but he's just a humble elevator operator in New York City here in America. And in 1954, the humble elevator operator is
that Karate Kid level shit, right? Oh, you're just like a teacher in Karate Club. You don't know what I've done. That type, basically that insert that trope here. That's what he is, right? Somebody come over, you don't know what I've done, and just like teach this new guy something.
Requested upon by the French government to fly over to France and to light the eternal flame at the tomb of the unknown French soldier, which he does. And then he just goes right back to operating the elevator in obscurity. And then in 1959, he is called upon by France again, and he is awarded the Médaille Militaire, which is the French equivalent of the Medal of Honor, and he is also made a Knight of France. Those, combined with the Croix de Guerre that he already has, comprise the three highest honors.
Wait a minute, I don't get it. Why is he working in New York elevator when he can just go back to France and just like give me like citizenship, making me VIP or whatever, right? Dual citizenship, why not? And he can actually be something there. People know who he is, who he was. He can try to get back his like club and everything, right? It's much easier to do that there than doing anything in New York. I guess he stayed there for his daughters. But then again, like, he can visit if he like gets rich like he was back then. I don't know.
Honors that the government of France can bestow upon anyone, and he's got all of them. Now, the entire time he's been an elevator operator, he's always like wearing a couple of medals or two. Nobody really says much about it. They don't recognize what they are. They're French medals. Why would anybody know that? And then he comes back and he's got, you know, the Legion of Honor, the medal that made him a knight, and he wears that to work one day, and there's this guy, his name's Dave Garroway. He's the host of the Today Show, a very, very popular show at the time. And he hops in the elevator with Gene again for probably the 1,000th time. And for whatever reason on this day, Dave Garroway recognizes that medal. And he's like, Gene, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's the Legion of Honor. It was just awarded to me recently. And he's like, what? And Gene, just being Gene, is like, yeah, I fought in World War I and World War II. I was the first black combat pilot ever, you know, so I kind of have some medals. At which point Dave Garroway is like, do you want to get interviewed like today, like right now? And Bullard's like, I mean, I'm working. I'd have to find somebody to cover my shift. And he's like, I'll make a phone call. Trust me, you're fine. Just come on. You're going to get interviewed on live TV right
I'll shut off the elevator if needs to be. Fuck it.
right now. So he goes on live TV for 15 minutes in his elevator operator's uniform. The whole thing goes viral for the 1950s. He ends up going on a bunch of other news shows. They all request that he wear his elevator operator's uniform because it's like kind of the shtick, I guess. But regardless, he gets his 15 minutes of fame and people finally start to know and recognize who he is. All this attention from the public actually inspires him to team up with an author and have his memoirs written and hopefully get them published. Unfortunately, once they were finished, no publisher wanted to publish them because, and I quote, "the story's too unbelievable." Luckily, there are several books written about him. Both of them are called All Blood Runs Red, one by Henry Harris and one by Phil Keith. From here, he has one last moment in the sun. The president of France comes to America for a trip, and they're making a huge deal out of it. There's a parade when he gets here. They're like, filming him, and everybody's watching him go to Saks Fifth Avenue to go shopping, and he's got this speaking engagement at this auditorium with like 5,000 people. And Eugene Bullard shows up to this speaking event, and the president, when he walks in, the crowd's cheering. He locks eyes with Eugene Bullard and he sees him, and the president walks straight up to him and says, "Are you Eugene Bullard?" To which he says, "Yes, Mr. President, I am." And he goes to shake his hand, and the president kind of swats his hand away and pulls Eugene in for a bear hug and says, "All of France owes you a great debt," as everybody cheers. And it's the perfect moment. Like, it's the end of Lord of the Rings. It's perfect.
My friends, you bow to no one.
Shortly after this, he is unfortunately diagnosed with a very aggressive form of intestinal cancer that would rapidly bring about the end of his life. 3 days after his
Bullard
66th
probably
birthday, he
did
would
that.
pass away. The last person to visit him was the author of his memoirs, Louise Harden. And when she got there, he was unconscious, in bed, laying down, hooked up to a breathing tube. And she's kind of crying quietly, and he must have heard her, because the last words that he ever said was he woke up, pulled out his breathing tube, and said, "Don't fret, honey, it's easy." The dude can't even die without being a complete badass about it. At his request, he was buried in a simple plot at the Federation of French War Veterans Cemetery in Queens. His grave is marked by a 1-foot slab of concrete on top of it, bearing his name, his date of birth, and his date of death. Also at his request, he was buried in his uniform, not his flag.
All of those are medals, right? His medals. Did they somehow like stick into the tombstone? Because if it not, like, people would steal that. I know there are assholes out there. It must have like sticking there, right?
White uniform, not the fancy suit that he wore while he was a spy and a nightclub owner, not with a set of boxing gloves, but in his French Legionnaire's uniform. Which tells me that at the end of the day, despite living one of the most incredible lives in human history, he didn't want to be remembered as the first black combat pilot, or the professional boxer, or the spy and the nightclub owner. He wanted to be remembered as a man that picked up a gun and went off into battle to fight for what he believed in, just like everybody else. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out. Okay, good. Now that I'm not fighting back tears anymore, can we talk about something for a minute? Will you look at this man right here? Okay, the dude has done like 12 different chapters of his life, and all of them are infinitely more badass than anything I will ever do. And he has the audacity to look like a professional male model the entire
Seriously, like, look at the chin and like the face and everything. Balenciaga, I can already see it right now.
fucking time he does it. This is outrageous. Okay, I gotta go like hug my kids or something. I feel like I've accomplished nothing with my life after telling that story.
Oh, there's nothing. Okay. Look at the chin and everything. Like, imagine that. Like, some don't Nazis anybody. Why won't you die? Look at this chin. That's why I won't die. Okay. This was everything insane, but by the end of his life, I don't know, man. This is why those interviews are so insane. Like, they requested him to wear that elevator uniform because nobody would believe it. Like, shouldn't he have gone back to France and do something there? I get it. Like, he wanted to be close to his, like daughters, but they were all married now. Like, he can't go to France and like visit if he wanted to. I don't know. In France, he was like proper. Even president recognized him, right? And I don't know. He could have done something there. He could have started his club again, do something. I don't know. Why did he like stay in like New York? I guess he didn't care. That's the thing. By that point, is like, if I can get food into my stomach, I don't care. I'd rather stay here type of way, right? He was very calm. I can already see like stoicness there. Like like even in death, he's like, don't fret. So I guess he didn't care that much by that point. That was the case, I'm guessing, right? But yeah, the whole story is so insane, right? Everything about it, like, Yeah, he basically played a whole video game with a massive campaign with massive side quests. He played Skyrim. You're not just Dragonborn. Now you're like a dark Brotherhood assassin. You're also the Thieves Guild guy, and like you. By the way, you're also in Stormcloaks or Imperial whatever. Like you're many things. You're not just one thing. He did all of that. Alright, well, that was the Black Sword of Death, Eugene Bullard by Channel Fire Attrition. If you like my next subscribe, and I'll see you next time.